Oh, I'm late. I know I'm late. I'm late. I'm sorry. Let's get this thing started. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. This week we are headed to Abu Dhabi, and oh boy do we have a fun card here. It is an absolutely stacked card. If you know what you're looking for, there's going to be action all over the place here. The casuals may not understand it, but we appreciate it, and that's going to make it all the more sweeter. Let's get right into this thing. We're a day behind, so I need to go ahead and do our recap of the last event, and I am not looking forward to talking about that with you guys. So last week we got roasted, toasted like a marshmallow. Did not go well for us at all, and to top it all off, I can no longer say I'm undefeated on my 2-unit bets. That really sucks. That one is the one that really kind of pierced me right in the chest, is that I had that perfect 100% record on my 2-unit bets, and that is gone out the window. Bye-bye. We knew it was going to happen eventually, but I was just hoping it wasn't quite so soon. So we had a couple of plays. Mark De La Rosa, you know what? He could have gotten that fight. I stand by that. He absolutely had the ability to win that fight, but he decided he wanted to be a counter striker. He didn't listen to his corner. When they were calling for action, when they were calling for him to push the pace, he completely ignored them and sat back and let Kai Kara-France get off first. And he gave that fight away, in my opinion. I feel like there was value on that line at plus 165, but Kai Kara-France very clearly did enough to win that fight. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't close. Kai Kara-France clearly won, and it was just frustrating for me because I saw the bright, shiny moments in that fight that showed me that we were on to something with De La Rosa. I honestly thought he was going to be a little bit more successful with the grappling, but you know what? That wasn't our most confident pick of the night, so I kind of shrugged it off. We took a stab at a decent-sized dog, and it didn't pan out. That happens sometimes. You know what? No harm, no foul. Moving on, we had our 2-unit parlay, which I was in love with. Damir Ismagulov came out, and he got the dang thing done. He absolutely dominated Thiago Moises from bell to bell. He did exactly what I thought he would do. He did exactly what I wanted him to. And that was just fun to watch after having him linked into a parlay. I thought we were home free on this thing. Unfortunately, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, he had maybe the worst fight of his entire career, and he was facing off against Jingling the Leech, and he had maybe the best fight of his career. It was a combination, the perfect storm of the worst possible things that could happen. Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos looked god-awful, and Jingling the Leech, I'm just going to call him the Leech. The Leech looked so damn good. He didn't brawl. He had a very calculated, very paced, smooth style that honestly we've never really seen him with. And it was obvious that he was the one landing the harder shots, which really surprised me. The other thing is, if you go back and watch it, Elizeu couldn't hit a damn thing. It was the weirdest thing. So the dude's name is Capoeira, and he's known very well for his speed, for his movement, his precision, his accuracy, and he could not hit the Leech. And it seemed like everything he threw, he would like blitz in and throw and wing these big shots that usually connect, and he was just off by a hair. And watching the fight, I believe it's a combination of the two. I couldn't tell if that was because of how good the Leech was moving and the footwork, the improvements that he made, or if Dos Santos was having a bad night. And I really, after taking a second look at it, I think that it was a combination of the two. The Leech made massive improvements, and Dos Santos just didn't look like himself. And honestly, this is something that I should have paid maybe a little bit more attention to, but I think that the travel really factored in for a lot of these fighters. The time shift, I mean, it was hard as hell for me just to stay awake at midnight getting the fight started, and yes, I did pull an all-nighter. Yes, I did stay up until midnight, and I watched those fights all the way through like it was a normal fight card. You UK folks, oh boy, you got to do that every single UFC event? I am sorry. From the bottom of my heart, I am sorry. Because, man, I don't think I'd be as big of a UFC fan as I am if I had to do that every single fight card. That would be awful. And then waking up and seeing all the results at once, that doesn't make it fun to bet on either. So that's tough. Oh boy. Okay, so drop the ball there. I can talk forward and backward forever about that fight because it was very intriguing, it was very interesting, and a lot of shit happened. But the long and short of it was Zaleski dos Santos dropped the ball, and we were on the wrong side in that fight. It was unfortunate that we lost our parlay there. And then we move on to the main event. And this one is another just super, super frustrating fight for me because Jessica Andrade, she pulled a cyborg. That's what happened here, is she pulled a cyborg. Anybody out there that was betting on Zhang, congratulations to you for winning that bet. She is a monster, and great call. But you were kind of taking a stab in the dark. Based on everything that we've got to work with, Jessica Andrade was a proven commodity, and Zhang is not. And now we know Zhang is good, but it's very similar to what Cyborg did with Amanda Nunes. She came out and she completely disrespected her opponent. She said, "We are going to slug until somebody falls over," and basically any and all strategy out the window. I put out a Twitter poll as to whether or not Zhang would still have that 100% next to her takedown defense rating, and it was an overwhelming answer of no, and I completely agreed with that. But Andrade didn't even look to take it down. I mean, granted, it was like a 15-second fight, but she came out and she decided to just swing until one of them fell over. And that just doesn't pan out well for anybody. So that sucked because I really wish that she had taken a slightly more measured approach. I know she's aggressive. I know that's her game. But that was wild and reckless beyond even the Andrade mark of wild and reckless. So I really feel like she dropped the ball. And even if Zhang was going to beat her in the long run, she could have put up a fight. Whereas that was just an absolute, okay, just all strategy went out the window. All strategy went out the window. Whoever landed the biggest shot first was going to win that fight, and it happened to be Zhang. She turned that thing into a coin flip real quick, which sucks for us laying the wood on her. So, unfortunately, we had the infamous reverse sweep. I feel like we got very unlucky with a couple of these spots that it could have been an okay night, a small losing night, especially with Dos Santos if he had gotten it done and the leech hadn't improved the way that he had. You know, that's the kind of stuff. Betting is a game of imperfect information. It's very much like poker. You've got to do all your research. You've got to look at all the signs. You've got to watch the fights, see the fighter's abilities, read the stats, compare them all, and then try and figure out what the best things are. But you are still never going to know everything. You are still going to get surprised. There is still the human element, which I feel like robbed us in the main event. The human element of Andrade throwing the game plan out the window and going for a straight forward brawl. And then you've got the leech human element of massive improvements that even a fighter who we've seen many, many, many times can one day show up and have a completely different game plan and have a completely different set of skills. And that's just, humans are capable of growth. That happens. And we got bit in the ass by it this week. So that is enough. I am done talking about that. We've dropped 2 bad nights in a row. The record is now 191 for plus 22.94 units. We are still over 20 units on the podcast since January, so we're still up units. We have still made money on the podcast. I apologize for all the new followers. I apologize for people who maybe have just jumped on the boat and started tailing, and we've had 2 bad nights back to back, but hey, that's gambling. We practice proper bankroll management over here. We bet a small amount so that it doesn't cripple us when nights like this happen. So just be careful not to overextend yourselves betting, because this kind of stuff does and will happen even to the best bettors, which I am not. I will blatantly admit that. I'm a guy who loves MMA and sits behind a computer and tells you what he thinks and what he bets on. So something to keep in mind when you guys are throwing shade at me online. Don't worry, I lost too. That being said, we still keep it positive here. We're going to keep on trucking straight forward. And after coming back from the dead, I was sick as a dog over the holiday weekend, had to call out of work, and the podcast is late because of that. So I apologize one more time for the podcast being late, but I am so excited for this Abu Dhabi card. Before we get into it, let's go ahead and do our usual housekeeping items. I've got to shout out some new subscribers that we've got over on YouTube. We've got Son of a J817, Derek Green, and we've got Lance Dudek and Mason's Production. Thank you all for joining the Die Hard community. I am looking forward to having you all hanging out here with us. We've got 269 subscribers over on YouTube. Those are rookie numbers. We got to get those rookie numbers up. I want to hit 1,000 subscribers. Can y'all help me out? Give the show a like, give it a thumbs up, comment. The more interactions we get on YouTube, the more the algorithms of YouTube work to get this thing out in front of more eyes. If you can share it on your social media, give people the heads up about the show so we can get this thing moving up. I want that 1,000 subscriber mark, so please help me out. Thank you all for your love and support. As always, if you wouldn't mind giving the show a rating over on iTunes or over on Stitcher, if you haven't done that already, I would appreciate it. And as always, I love you guys. And do not forget about our partnership we've got going on with betodds.ag. If you haven't already, head over there. We've got a 100% deposit bonus match for Die Hard MMA podcast listeners only. The code is FE6EFB. You can get a 100% deposit bonus match between $50 and $500 on your initial deposit. That is something they are not currently offering to anybody. The most you can get over there right now is 60% unless you use this code. That's going to be awesome. Football season is upon us, and I know you degenerates love to bet more than just MMA. And every time you've got a new book, you've got the opportunity to maybe get a different line, a better line, which we know means you'll be profiting more in the long run. So if you're serious about betting, snag yourself a second book, get over there, get that free deposit bonus match, and get on with betodds.ag. Use the code FE6EFB. Let them know the Die Hard MMA podcast sent you. Now that we got the mushy stuff out of the way, let's dig straight into UFC 242. It's a good one. Let's go. Just so you all know, I put tons of research hours into this card. I am looking at a lot of different things, and I had an absolute blast researching this card. There is so much action to be had on this card as far as great fights. This is going to be a highly entertaining night of fights, in my opinion. Lots of really, really cool stuff going on. So we kick this thing right off with a banger. Madge versus Ziam, and this is gonna be one where you don't really know a whole lot about either of these guys, and that's what you come here for. I did the legwork for you, ladies and gentlemen. So Madge, this guy kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. He's 8-3-1, and he's only been in the UFC for one fight, and his intro to the UFC was against T. Edwards. Now, T. Edwards was the guy that absolutely shit the bed against Dennis Bermudez, and technically I guess he shit the bed on Don Madge. He was maybe the hottest prospect coming off of season 2 of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He's now 0-2 in the UFC, and he came in against Don Madge as a minus 500 favorite. Don Madge showed up having a 7-3 record, and everyone thought he was going to get steamrolled, myself included. We dodged that bullet as far as not putting a bet on it, but oh my god, I know so many people who parlayed Tay Edwards in that fight, and it just got absolutely Thanos snapped those things straight out of existence. And Don Madge, he's got huge power in all of his limbs. He's got a really smart defensive ground game when he's on his back, and then he explodes with these really fast submission attacks. He's constantly attacking. Now, I said he's got 3 losses, one by KO, one by sub, and then one by decision. They're all from the same fighter. So there's just this one guy out there that figured out Don Madge that he couldn't beat. I mean, I know those are 3 separate losses on his career, but they're all to the same guy. He could technically be 8-1 right now, and the world would think completely differently of him. For this fight, he was training to go up against Magomed Mustafayev, who is 15-2 and trains out of ATT. An absolute monster of a fighter is who he was getting ready to go up against. And based on his Instagram, he is in the best shape of his life. I have never seen this guy in this kind of shape. Now, granted, he hasn't been around on the UFC scene for a whole long time, but you look back through some of his pictures and stuff like that, it's very clear how seriously he took this fight. He is on the big stage, and he knows it. He was ready to come out here against a 15-2 ATT product in Mustafayev and put on a show. This dude was ready to play spoiler. Now, one thing that we've got to keep in mind, these guys are all traveling to Abu Dhabi. The fights start at like 8 a.m. my time. The main card, the pay-per-view card, starts at I think 11 a.m. my time. So this is another one where it's not quite as bad as China, where they completely flipped it on its head and you're fighting at midnight It's not quite that bad, but they're fighting several hours earlier, and it's a full day's worth of travel to get over there. Experts say that you should travel 1 day ahead of time per hour of travel. So if you're coming from, obviously it depends on where in the world you're coming from, but you want to get out there over a week in advance for these kinds of things. And the hometown fighters are going to have a huge advantage, not only because they're going to have their hometown crowd, that giant Muslim Russian crowd behind them roaring every time they do anything and affecting the judges. Not only that, but because of the travel, the fighters that are coming from North America and the fighters that are coming from even places like England, there's gonna be jet lag for those guys because it's taking them so long to get to this location that's way out in the middle of nowhere. And Don Madge looked like he took this whole thing very seriously. He was ready to pull the upset against Mustafayev, and I'm bummed that fight got dropped because honestly, I was going to bet on him against Mustafayev. I really thought that he would be pulling this upset. Now he gets replaced here, Mustafayev that is, got replaced by Ziam. Now Faraz, this kid is 10-2 and he fights out of France. He actually looks like he is pretty damn legit. He is long and rangy. He's got really, really smart and well-timed takedown entries. He does tend to give up his neck a little bit, and people get pretty deep in there. I've seen it on a couple of his fights that I pulled up. He doesn't seem concerned with it. He does defend those chokes very well, but it is a little bit of a concern that he just leaves his neck hanging out there. People in the UFC will be able to punish him for that mistake. He does use tall man defense, and what that means is he generally does like the Texecutioner, James Vick. That's tall man defense. When he's walking backwards, he's not bobbing and weaving. He's not putting his head down. Like, he's not moving out of the way. He just simply leans backwards or sticks his chin up in the air, thinking he will be tall, long, and rangy enough to get away from whatever his opponent is throwing. That's the kind of defense that he has, and that leaves you open for strikes. Now, he does use his striking game really effectively to open up takedown opportunities. He uses excellent low kicks. He goes to his opponent's legs and calves and ankles to really try and slow them down, and he does have relentless grappling. When he decides he wants a takedown, he goes for it and he sticks to you like glue. This is a massive step up in competition for this kid. He's only 22 years old, and he's taking this fight on like a week's short notice. Not only that, you factor in he's fighting a guy in Don Madge who is training for the biggest opportunity of his career against the best fighter that he's ever faced. Don Madge embraced that and was ready to freaking go in this fight. The only thing that concerns me is that Don Madge sometimes will accept bottom position because he's really confident in his ground game. The guy's got an offensive submission game, and he likes to go to that. But for Ziam, if he can't get the takedown, or if because he's on a short notice he gasses out in any way, shape, or form, Don Madge will crush him for that. Don Madge doesn't slow down. He keeps coming, and he's like a dog on a bone. When he wants something, he's got that killer instinct. He will go and go and go until he breaks you, and I think he's got a huge edge on the feet over Ziam. Now, Ziam is good on the feet. Don't get me wrong. I'm not underrating this kid. He's probably a prospect that the UFC could have and should have picked up, whether or not it was in this particular spot. But I really feel like Don Madge just gets it done here. I was ready to bet Don Madge as a dog against his opponent, Mustafayev, and given what we think about Mustafayev, which, by the way, is all good things, if we think Don Madge can beat Mustafayev, I think Don Madge can beat Ziam. Right now, you can get Don Madge sitting at minus 156. There's been roughly 50-50 on the money in this spot, and that's almost akin to a reverse line movement situation. If the money was even coming in, you would think that the line would essentially stay the same, but the heavier money or the more important money has come in on Ziam, and I think that's probably because of his grappling. I think people expect him to come out here and put Don Madge on his back. However, Don Madge is fucking strong. And with Ziam coming in on short notice the way he is, we know that's going to hamper his gas tank. And Ziam might be able to take out scrubs on the regional scene. He does have a 90% finish rate, but he's fighting people that are non-UFC caliber. If he's fighting even good opponents who are non-UFC caliber, sure, he's gonna finish them. This is a huge step up in competition for him, which means that he's probably going to go to a decision or get finished himself, because it's just that next step up, that next level. And coming into it without a camp, relatively unheralded and not ready for it, this is a tall order for him. I think minus 155 on Don Madge over at 5 dimes, actually. 1 point barely better than the 156 at Penny. We can get Don Madge at minus 155, and I think that's a great bet to start the night off. I have no problem laying minus 155 with Don Madge to get this thing done, because I really think that he is going to outlast Ziam. If he does make this into a grappling match, Don Madge has zero problem with that. I don't think Faraz will be able to hold Don Madge down if Don Madge doesn't want to be down. And if Don Madge is down for a couple of rounds, he will come out in round 3 and he will look for the kill. And that's when Ziam will more than likely be slowing down. Trust me, go check out Don Madge on Instagram. He is ready to go. First bet of the night, Don Madge, minus 155. If you haven't figured it out, ladies and gents, this one is going to be a long one, so buckle in. If you're one of those people who doesn't like my long podcasts, this one ain't it. Go listen to somebody else's show. We are digging deep this week. The second fight on the evening is going to be Omari Akhmedov versus Zach Cummings. And this is another one that I am surprisingly interested in. Now, Omari Akhmedov is 18-4-1, and obviously his name ends in Ov, so he's going to be the hometown favorite in this spot. Zach Cummings is 23-6-0. And he's been a little bit of an interesting case lately, and I'll get into that. Let's start with Omari Akhmedov. He's physically powerful. He's got really strong explosive takedowns. He uses his strikes very well to set up those takedowns, and he comes in with long, hard looping hooks. He's actually got a really good jab. He does the low kicks. He really controls his opponent's space well. Basically, it feels like all of these strikes are used to kind of corral his opponents and put them where he wants them, and he's got excellent control as far as that space and that distance is concerned to do what he wants to do. Now, he's got a really solid chin. Anytime he takes shots, he just kind of eats them. He's not someone who's going to get knocked out easy. When it does get on the ground, he's got really good awareness, really good submission defense, and really good ground and pound. Now, remember, I only get into the stats, generally speaking, when they matter, especially when you've got like a UFC fighter versus a non-UFC fighter. It's really hard. You can't compare the stats in those cases. This is one where I feel like they matter. Significant strikes per minute landed by Akhmedov is 3.07. Sorry, I got tongue-tied there for a second. He has a 34% striking accuracy. So the accuracy is low, but he's still actually got a significant output. His significant strikes absorbed is 2.89 with a 57% defense. So he is outputting just ever so slightly more than he is absorbing. Now keep in mind, he's fought guys like Gunnar Nelson, Sergio Moraes, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, and then Marvin Vettori. So he's been in there with some seriously high output fighters, and that's why those stats are the way they are. His takedown per 15 minutes is 2.51 with a 48% accuracy. So he is landing almost a full takedown per round, which does definitely matter. And then on the flip side of that, he's got a 58% takedown defense. So not only is he landing a lot of takedowns and obviously shooting for a lot of takedowns, he's defending his takedowns that come against him actually relatively well. Now, Zach Cummings on the flip side of this, he is 23-6-0. He's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage in this spot, but you know what? He really keeps his hands low. And I'll be honest with you, I think Zach Cummings has been degrading as of late. So Omari is 31 years old. He's in his fighting prime right now. Zach Cummings is 35. He is moving up a weight class, and he's at that age where you start to see fighters start to slide down that slippery slope towards 40. He does use leg kicks a lot, but it concerns me that he keeps his hands low when he fights, and he does fight moving backwards a whole lot in attempts to counter his opponents. The only problem is he doesn't really have that one-punch KO power. He used to be kind of more of a volume guy. I think he got a couple of knockouts and decided, or knockouts or knockdowns, and he decided that he's a power puncher. He kind of fell in love with it, almost like Sam Alvey has, and it's not really working for him. He does tend to switch stances a lot, which kind of confuses his opponents from time to time, and he's got that toughness where he just doesn't quit. I mean, even if he's down and out, he does come back and really try to put it on his opponents to get a finish. We saw that in his most recent fight against Trevin Giles, where he rocked him and then locked up that guillotine choke in the 3rd round. Now, that is a fight that I really want to shine some light on, because leading into that fight, I had said that I wanted to bet Zach Cummings because I thought he was a live dog in that spot, but I thought thought that Trevin Giles was going to win. And when you watch that fight, Trevin Giles dominates Zach Cummings from bell to bell. And then in round 3, Trevin Giles makes an explosive move, and Zach Cummings catches him with a shot that the combination of the two just rocks him silly. Absolutely rocks Trevin Giles silly. And then Zach Cummings, who is a very talented submission artist, locks on a guillotine choke and gets it done with 1 minute left on the clock in the 3rd round. If it hadn't been for that, Trevin Giles would have essentially coasted to a 3-round unanimous decision win, in my opinion. Now, Omari Akhmedov, he's going to be the hometown guy here. And like I said previously, that really, really matters in this spot. If this is going to be a close fight, he's going to win. The judges are going to give it to him. And Zach Cummings, he has increasingly low output. He averages 2.63 significant strikes per minute with a 32% accuracy. So less output than our guy Akhmedov and less accuracy than our guy Akhmedov. He absorbs 2.87 significant strikes per minute with a 52% defense. His defense is worse than Akhmedov's, and he absorbs more significant strikes than he lands. He attempts less than one takedown, or he lands less than one takedown per 15 minutes, and he's only got a 28% accuracy. Now, he does have a 66% takedown defense, which that's a decent, respectable number. But looking at the numbers, he is worse than Omari Akhmedov absolutely everywhere. And when I get an opponent like that, you have to look at the records and you go, okay, you know what? So is that because he's fought an incredibly high level of competition, and that's something that we need to be, aware of, that maybe those numbers are damaged because he fought these good fighters? Well, not really. We've understood recently, because of the way Trevin Giles screwed up in his last fight, that we have to be very cautious with that guy. He's athletic, he's got some good skills, but he's not all he's cracked up to be. He fought Trevor Smith, he fought and lost to Michel Prejerish, which that's a decent opponent to lose to. And then he fought Alexander Yakovlev, which nothing to say there. Santiago Ponzinibbio, that's a good opponent. Dominique Steele, Gunnar Nelson, who is another middle of the road. I mean, you look at these names and really he's beating the cans, and then he is, or fluking his way to a win in the Trevin Giles situation, or he's losing to the half-decent, good, upper middle tier type of fighters, but nobody that really stands out. What that means is he is a mid-tier to low-tier fighter, and like I said, I believe he's getting worse. Omari Akhmedov seems to be coming into his own. His last 3 fights are Abdul Razak Al-Hassan, who is I'm high on that kid, Marvin Vettori, and Tim Bosch. Now, granted, it's the shadow of Tim Bosch, it's what's left of Tim Bosch. It's not the Tim Bosch of old, but he controlled that fight from bell to bell, and it was completely obvious that he was the rightful winner of that one. He fought to a draw with Marvin Vettori, which he won the first 2 rounds, and I think he gassed out in round 3 and let Marvin Vettori get back into that one. That one's not a fight that I'm a huge fan of when doing this breakdown, because that means Akhmedov could gas out theoretically against Cummings, but Cummings is not going to put it on him like Marvin Vettori did. So if Akhmedov banks the first 2 rounds in this fight and then Zach comes on hard in round 3, he doesn't have the kind of output or the kind of power that's going to put Akhmedov in any kind of trouble. And as we already said, Cummings really isn't a power striker, and Akhmedov's got a damn good chin. And Abdul Razak Al-Hassan is one of the hardest freaking hitters out there right now. He KOs literally everybody. And the only loss on his record is our boy Omari Akhmedov. Now, granted, it was a split decision, but he's KO'd literally everybody else he's fought. The one loss on his record and the one decision on his record were to our boy Omari Akhmedov. I think Omari Akhmedov has the advantage essentially everywhere this fight takes place. And both of these guys have bounced around between 170 and 185, so they're roughly the same size. One dude's in his prime, the other one's fading. And you know what? So much money has come in on Zach Cummings that I am going to fade the public here. And I don't do that a whole lot because there's a reverse line movement situation, and usually I steer completely away from those. 53% of the money has come in on Omari Akhmedov. 40% of the money has come in on Zach Cummings, and that line has gone backwards like we talk about with the reverse line movement. Omari Akhmedov started as a minus 140 favorite, and we can get him as low as minus 118 right now. And I got to tell you, I love that. Everyone and their dog is talking about Zach Cummings and wanting to bet Zach Cummings, and Zach Cummings, oh, he's such a good underdog in this spot. No. No, he's not. Omari Akhmedov is better literally everywhere. The line was accurate when it opened. He should be a minus 140 favorite. And if you took the stab on Zach Cummings at plus 110, you got a bad line, bro. You needed more dog money than that. He is getting worse. And the best thing about this is we have it in our back pocket that Akhmedov is going to have the crowd, the judges, and everyone there behind him. If it's close, if these guys stare at each other and they land one or two shots, you know who wins that round? Akhmedov does. We have the trump card in our back pocket for this fight, and I love it. We're going to take on Omari Akhmedov at minus 118. We are going full degenerate this week. The next fight up is Nordine Taleb, 15-6-0, taking on Muslim Salikhov, who's 14-2-0. Nordine Taleb is an interesting case in the world of the UFC. At 15-6, that doesn't even come close to telling the whole story. Now, he fights out of a combination of TriStar Gym and Tiger Muay Thai, which are two of the best gyms that you can possibly go to, and he has huge kicking power. He's a BJJ brown belt. He actually competed in Bellator prior to coming over to the UFC. He was on Tough Nations, and then in a really weird turn of things back to back, he was on the Ultimate Fighter Team Edgar versus Team Penn. He's, I think, the only fighter to ever do consecutive Ultimate Fighter events. Don't know why you would do that. Everyone says it's absolute crap, but hey, seemed to work for him. He's got really excellent knees from the clinch, and he scrambles really well when it hits the mat. He's got great footwork, excellent head movement. All that time out at Tiger Muay Thai got him that, and now he is 38 years old, so he's inching ever closer to that 40-year-old mark that we absolutely hate. Now, one thing I want to note here is that he's teammates with Alex Garcia. Alex Garcia is the last guy to submit Smolyakov, who is the opponent here in this case, and that means he's got him in his back corner. He is teammates with a guy that beat this dude, and this dude's only got 2 losses. Now, he went to Abu Dhabi a full 2 weeks early to acclimate, and that's something that I think is massively important here. He's been out there for a full 2 weeks. The dude hails from Canada, so it was smart of him to get out there that early, and you've got to think that with 2 full weeks out there, he is ready to go. Now look, this is another one. I've taken this angle a couple times recently, and it seems to be doing very, very well. Now, I know you can't buy into just how good of shape fighters are in. It's not the end-all be-all, but recently when I've been taking that line, it's been paying off. Nordine Taleb is in what I would call holy fucking shit shape. Sorry for the language, Mom, if you're listening. This dude is in absolutely incredible shape right now, and I think he is going to cause a problem. He's one of those guys who never got the rub he really felt like he deserved, and even though he's later in his career, he's got all the skills to pay the bills, and he's really looking forward to making a run in this case right now. He is fighting UFC newcomer Muslim Salikhov. Now, I say newcomer, he's actually had 2 fights in the UFC, but he's a lot newer than Nordine is. Now, Smolyakov stepped into the cage, lost his UFC debut against Alex Garcia, we know that much, and then came back with a dominant KO over Ricky Rainey, and that is something that I don't know if it means a whole lot. Ricky Rainey didn't do too well in the UFC, and he hasn't done all that great in Bellator either. He's been knocked out by both of his UFC opponents. Granted, it was Smolyakov and Tim Means, and Tim Means knocks a lot of mid to low tier fighters out as well. His record's 13-6 if you care. Now, Muslim Smolyakov, these names are going to get old real quick. They are hard to say. He's slow and he's stocky, and that's something that I think is going to give the edge over to Taleb. He explodes, though, with power shots. He's got serious knockout power, so if he explodes and catches you, he can and will knock you out. However, he can be out-grappled. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. Everyone's going to say he's a blue belt. He got promoted about 2 months ago, so if you didn't see that, he's up just ever so slightly 1 notch, but I still don't think he's on the level of Taleb's brown belt. He actually had a pro kickboxing career prior to his MMA career, and he was 185-13 with 76 knockouts. Dude is a legit striker. Legit striker. He's also a multi-time Wushu world champion. He counters very, very, very well. But back in 2018, he actually got notified of a USADA violation. Dude popped hot for Tyranobol, but USADA was never able to actually prove that the Turinabol was ingested. So they gave him a very short suspension and let him off the hook. Now, 2018 was the last time we saw this guy in action, and he's had to be in the USADA pool since then. So you're telling me that we've got a 35-year-old dude who's probably been on Turinabol his entire career, and now he's going to be off the Turinabol because he's in the UFC and damn near got busted for taking it? Huh. I wonder if he's going to decline at all. He's facing Nordine Taleb, who's got the cheat code of having a teammate that was the last guy that beat him. He's in the best shape of his life, especially at 38, and can match this guy almost, resume for resume. Obviously, he can't match that 185 wins in kickboxing, but I mean, it's pretty damn close. Let's look at the stats. Nordine Taleb averages 3.74 significant strikes per minute with a 51% accuracy. Very, very high level of output. The significant strikes he absorbs is 2.64. He's got a 67% defense rate. So there is a full strike per minute gap between what he's putting out and what he's taking. He's got excellent striking defense. He averages 2 takedowns, 2.01 takedowns every 15 minutes, and he lands those takedowns with a 76% accuracy, and he's got a 73% takedown defense. He decides where fights take place. If he wants it on the mat, he can get it there. If his opponents want to take him down, more often than not, they can't. Now, Salikhov on the other side of this thing, 1.99 significant strikes per minute, a large drop from what we see in Taleb. And he's got a 46% accuracy, which in itself is not bad, but it's definitely a lot less than Taleb as well. Now, he absorbs 1.42 with a 63% defense. So he does output more than he absorbs in the significant strikes, but it's very, very much closer than what we see with Nordine Taleb. He does have a 62% takedown defense, and he is 0% on takedown offense. Granted, he's only got 2 attempts in the whole of his UFC career, so that's not a whole lot to go off. These stats simply come from 2 fights in the UFC, so it's a very small sample size. We do have to take a little bit of a grain of salt when we look at these kinds of numbers, because we've only got a couple fights to go off of. Now, let's take a look at his last couple of opponents, okay? So you go 3 fights back, and he fought Ivan George, Batman, who's 27-8. Dude's 38 years old and has been winning a lot. Has been losing a lot more than he's been winning as of late. Definitely a lifetime fighter who had a damn good record back in the day. But since 2014, he's gone 5-2. Now we take a look at his most recent opponent after that. I'm not even going to try to say the new dude's name. Go ahead and head on over to Tapology or SureDog and look at it yourself. He's 0-2. Brand new fighter stepping in to fight this multi-time kickboxing and wushu champion. They set that poor dude up. And then he fought Melvin Guillard. We all know the name Melvin Guillard from the UFC. Used to be one of the hot rising prospect stars, but he's on a BJ Penn style dominant losing streak of like 9 fights in a row. So no surprise that this dude beat Melvin Guillard. Not only that, Melvin's a natural 155er, and this guy fights up at 170. That's just a poor job of Melvin taking that fight and his management for setting him up for that spot. Poor Melvin. So at any rate, you put all of that together, and I really think Nordine Taleb's got an excellent shot of playing spoiler here in this fight. I don't want to go against the hometown crowd. I do not want to bet against the Muslim fighters. But this is one of the hometown fighters who I don't really think very much of. I think that this is primarily going to be a striking match, and Nordine, if he wants to be smart about it, could take this thing down to the ground. If he does, he's going to have a massive ground advantage once it gets there. And even on the feet, even though Salikhov's got all of these, belts and all these whatever the hell you want to call it, he's really decorated as a striker. Nordine Taleb can hold his own with this guy. He's got 7 KOs of his 15 wins, and he's been training out at Tiger Muay Thai basically forever. The dude is scary and in absolutely scary shape. Now this is a reverse line movement that I want to be on. Nordine Taleb opened up as a plus 100 even money underdog. 52% of the money has come in on Salikhov and 48% has come on Taleb. Taleb is now sitting as the favorite. We can get him at minus 115 at Pinnacle. And this is a fight that I don't think it's going to be that close. I think Taleb runs away with this thing. Now, granted, Salikhov could land that knockout shot. Of course, that's always a threat. He's only gone to decision once his entire career, so he finishes more often than not, obviously. But I think Nordine Taleb is probably going to control this thing. I think he's going to be more agile on the feet. He'll be able to control the range. He won't leave himself open to crazy counters, and he'll mix in the takedowns far more than Salikhov will. I think Nordine Taleb is going to decide where this fight takes place, and I do think he's going to win it. The only thing that gives me pause in this fight is that Nordine Taleb was recently knocked out by Sean Strickland, October of 2018. Now, he's had plenty of time to recover from that, but we did talk about how he is 38 years old. Muslim Salikhov is 35. So he's going to be the younger fighter. He's also going to be the hometown fighter. So I'm going to exercise a little bit of regrettable self-control here and pass on this fight. It's very close. It's very coin flippy. I do think Nordine Taleb is going to win this thing, but you can't count out a guy like Muslim Salikhov with the kind of striking background that he's got, and because of the age of Nordine Taleb, we've got a good enough reason to get away from this thing. Let's save that bullet for somewhere else down the card. Now, if you're one of those action junkies that wants something on every single fight, I'd be all over Nordine Taleb if you're going to have money on this fight on one side or the other, but let's look for a little bit better of a spot. Next up, we've got Belal, remember the name Muhammad, taking on Takashi Sato. Belal is 15-3-0, Takashi is 15-2-0, and this is a fight that frustrates me. So Belal is one of those super consistent fighters. He does the same thing every single time. You know exactly what you're getting yourself into when you face off against Belal Muhammad. He's been working with Paul Felder, who actually fights later on down the card. So that's a positive. I do like when you've got teammates that are pushing each other and working together and fighting on the same card. That always helps. He's got constant forward pressure. He sets a pace, and he really tries to bully his opponents with him. Now, he is Muslim, so he's gonna be the quote-unquote hometown fighter here, even though he is not from the Middle East. He's from the United States. He's not from Russia, but he's a Muslim, so he's going to have the crowd behind him here. So that's something we have to keep in mind. He has excellent use of feints. He handles range very well. He sets up his entries for takedowns very well, and he's pretty well-rounded. Now, the problem here is he lands 4.39 significant strikes per minute. He's got a 41% accuracy, but he absorbs 3.95 strikes per minute. He's only got a 59% defense. I say only, that's actually a pretty good striking defense, but he's absorbing a lot of significant strikes per minute. And based on that, you would think that defensive percentage would be a lot lower than what it looks like. Now, he averages about 2 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 33% accuracy. He's got a 90% takedown defense, but it's that takedown accuracy that kind of has me worried a little bit. So he basically tries to outstrike his opponents. He tries to lock up wins by taking his opponents down at the last second, secure rounds, but he is not the best striker in the room more often than not. He's a much better grappler than he is a striker. This dude has been through the wood chipper. He lost to Alan Joban, then he got KO'd by Vicente Luque. He fought Randy Brown, Jordan Mean, Tim Means, Chance Rencounter, Geoff Neal, and Curtis Millender. If you listen to those names, a lot of those guys are young up-and-coming rising stars, and if they're not, they're just brutal knockout artists. Belal has taken a lot of damage in his career. He's an excellent fighter. He does what he does, but holy crap, he has taken a bunch of damage, and you've got to wonder when that's going to start taking its toll on him. Now, Takashi Sato, this dude is 15-2-0. Now, he went to Abu Dhabi about a full week early, which I think is a smart move. I wish he would have gone out just a little bit earlier than that so he could acclimate better, but at least he went out more than a couple of days. He recently moved over to Hard Knocks 365, so what that means is he's working over there with guys like Derek Brunson. His coach is Henry Hooft. He's training with Kamaru Usman. And the biggest hole that I saw in his game was his takedown defense and his grappling. That is obviously getting patched up. He's working with the champion. Now, he fights really well at long range. He's got excellent use of elbows, and when he does defend takedowns, he hammers on his opponent's head. And he's got some serious pop in his punches. Now, I know he's only been in the UFC for one fight. He fought Ben Saunders, who is not a good opponent, who's a very chinny opponent, and he kind of got roughed up a little bit. His stats are super skewed right now because it was only a single fight, but he output 4.44 significant strikes per minute, and he absorbed 7.3. Now, that's always been Ben Saunders' thing, is that he will dish out tons of pressure. He just can't take anything back. So Sato was eventually able to weather the storm and crack Saunders' chin and put him down. But he absorbed a whole lot of damage getting there. It's obvious that he's making the right kind of moves that he needs to make in order to improve on something like that, and he is only 29 years old. Honestly, I smell an upset here. Takashi Sato right now, you can get him as high as plus 316 over at Bookmaker. Belal Muhammad is a minus 440 favorite. Now, this is another reverse line movement situation. Belal opened up at minus 275, and only 38% of the money has come in on him, driving him all the way up above that minus 400 mark. This line is getting out of hand. If Takashi Sato gets up as far as like plus 400, I'm going to have to take the shot. I'm going to have to. I've been watching his training clips and stuff that he puts up on Instagram. He is in good shape, and he's working with Usman constantly on defending the takedown, and once he gets put on the ground, getting back up to the feet. That combined with the kind of elbows that he throws on his opponents while they're trying to get in deep on a takedown, the fact that he's going to be longer and rangier than his opponent in this fight, at least the way he fights is a longer, rangier style. He's got a 73-inch reach when compared to Belal's 72-inch reach. It's not a lot, but it's there. He's going to have the striking advantage. I believe he's going to be the better fighter on the feet. Now, Belal has beaten guys that were super high on, like Chance Rincounter, like Curtis Millender, and he lost to a guy like Geoff Neal, but Neal, I think, is far more well-rounded at this point than Sato is. Sato might realistically be or get on that level working with a guy like Kamaru Usman, and we've seen the kind of improvements they've made with a guy like Darren Brunson just recently, so I think they can do the same with this kind of a raw fighter. Like I said, keep an eye out on my timeline for this one, because if that line continues to get wider and wider like it is, if people keep parlaying the hell out of Belal, they're going to force me to take a shot on Sato. For now, it's a pass, but I really wouldn't be shocked if Sato gets this thing done. Next up, we're in the lightweight division with Ottman Azaitar, the bulldozer, who is 11-0, facing off against Teemu Packalen, who's 8-2. And I'll be honest, this is a fight that I'm simply straight up struggling with. Ottman Azaitar's got really good recovery, but he's always willing to brawl. He's very hittable. He's got really good KO power. This is his UFC debut, so we have no stats on him. But of his 11 undefeated wins, he's got 7 knockouts for a 64% knockout rate. The dude's only gone to the decision one time, so he's got a 91% finish rate. He jumps all over guillotines. He's got these big, thick python arms, and he's got a real solid choke game. So he is a finisher all over the place, and he's only been out of the first round 3 times. Now flip this thing over to Teemu Packalen. Teemu has been in the UFC for 3 fights, and he's gone 1-2. This one's weird. He's awkward. He's got really awkward striking, but he hits really hard. He moves backwards, and then he kind of dives in for takedowns. He's willing to do this awkward thing, kind of a Damian Maia-esque pull guard from a takedown attempt, doing anything in the world he can to get you on the mat. He's a submission specialist, and he's always looking for the sub. He does drop for leg locks, which I like. Leg locks are the devil's fruit when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So anytime you've got a guy that's good at leg locks in MMA, I like that. They can use leg locks for a lot. You can sweep people, you can get your opponent off of you, and hey, if you lock up a leg lock, it's pretty much over. He moved over to TriStar for some training recently, which is a great move, especially for a grappling heavy style, and he appears to have packed on a decent amount of muscle. Now, he's been off for 2 years, so he's the kind of fighter who's at the right age, who's making the right moves, who's gone to the right gym. I expect improvements. The last time we saw him, though, was in 2017, and he got blast knocked out by Mark Diakese. Now, I think that his UFC run of 1-2 makes him look worse than it actually should. I think this guy's got legit skills, and his submission game is on point, but he's fighting the hometown kid here in Ottman Azaitar, who is going to have the crowd once again behind him, and he's a devastating puncher, and he's got a decent sub game himself. So I've got to wonder if Azaitar is not going to be able to defend basically pretty much anything Packalen throws out there. The other thing is, both of these guys are going to be really hard to trust. It would not shock me if Packalen showed up and caught Azaitar in something because his ground game has just improved miles since jumping out to TriStar for a full 2-year training camp. Azaitar, on the other hand, might get on top of this guy and pound him out, and that wouldn't shock me one bit either. And even more so than that, this is another reverse line movement spot. 65% of the money has come in on Teemu Packalen. He opened as a plus 180 underdog. You can get him up at plus 195, plus 200 now. Azaitar is all the way up to minus 226. Now, actually, I say all the way up to. He opened at minus 240. So it's kind of an awkward spot where the favorite is a shorter favorite now than he was before, but the dog is a bigger dog than he was before. It's not quite reverse alignment. It's some weird hybrid in the middle line movement. I'm not quite even sure what to call that. Either way, sorry for the big deep breaths here. I'm getting excited. Either way, I can't trust either of these guys. We're going to completely pass on this fight because I don't know under or over, and I don't know what side's the right side. There could be value on Teemu Packalen at 2-1, but you know what? He could get absolutely raffle stomped. There may be no value on him at plus 200. And same thing with the flip side of this thing. If you wanted to look for a total, these guys might finish it in the first 30 seconds. Both of them have done that, and Teemu himself has been finished within the first 30 seconds of a fight. He has only gotten out of the first round 3 times either. So, I mean, I don't freaking know. Next up, we're headed to women's bantamweight where Liana Jojua takes on Sarah Moras. And this is a very, very interesting fight for more than one reason. So to get us started here, first off, this is the first ever women's fight in Abu Dhabi. And I think that's a super cool thing. Obviously I can't speak too much about the Muslim religion, but it's very well documented, the oppression that women have over in those kinds of countries. So it's really cool that they're able to pull off women's fights on this fight card in an area where, honestly, women would probably be scared to go and deal with these men that have that kind of an outlook on them, and then also fight in front of a crowd that's relatively hostile towards them. So props to the UFC for putting this fight on. Props to these ladies for taking this fight. I hope that the Abu Dhabi crowd backs them, gets behind them, and supports them, because this is a big, big move. This is a big, big step, and they should be congratulated on it. So let's get started here. Jojua is 7-2-0, and she's facing Sarah Cupcake Moras. Love that. Cupcake. And she's 5-5. Definitely not an impressive record at 5-5, but we will get into that. Now, Jojua is an intelligent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. She's good, really good off of her back, and she's really smart about what she does when she's on her back. She is able to sweep her opponents, but she, besides that, has difficulty getting up. So if she goes for a sweep and hits it, it looks really good, fancy, impressive, but if she can't hit that sweep, she doesn't really know how to get off of her back. And a lot of times you can create space, stand up, wall walk, use the cage. She doesn't do stuff like that. Once she gets on top, she does have a good top control game. She has really good submission defense. It's hard to choke this girl out. She's shown that in the fights that I was able to watch, but she has really, really basic striking. She stalks forward, and it's kind of effective, but she basically throws 1-2s and 1-2-3 punch combos, and that is about it. She does try to keep the forward pressure on, and that's a good thing. She's only 24, so I'm sure she's evolving in that area, but it's not overly impressive at the moment. She does have a relatively low level of competition that she's fought, so, I mean, it's worked for her so far, but I don't think it's going to cut it in the UFC. She's from Georgia, which, if you don't know Georgia, it's over there near Iraq, Iran, so she will, again, technically be the hometown girl in this spot. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. With the men especially, when they're from the area, especially if they're Muslim, you would expect them to have the crowd's support. With this being the first women's fight, I don't know how much hometown love she's going to get. They don't want women, remember, they wear like the traditional headdresses. They're covered in robes from head to toe. They're not supposed to show anything. This is going to be interesting when the woman who's supposed to be the person that they're cheering for comes out in, showing her legs, that kind of thing. I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be racist. I don't know how they're going to respond to that. So I don't know if she's going to get a pop from the crowd or not. It wouldn't shock me if the crowd stayed completely silent for the women's fight, almost trying to boycott it or something like that. I hope that's not the case, but it wouldn't shock me. Now, Sarah Moras, on the flip side of this thing, she's been in the UFC for a while now. She's actually had 6 UFC fights, and it's been a bit of a rough road. She's gone 2-4, and that leads to her 5-5 record. But let's look at who she's been fighting. I mean, she fought Jessica Andrade, Lucy Pudilova, Tatiana Bernardo, Macy Chiasson, and then Ashley Evans Smith. I mean, before she got into the UFC, she fought Juliana Pena and Raquel Pennington. I mean, she's fought a lot of really well-known, solid women fighter names, and especially with the Lucy Pudilova, Talieda, Bernardo, and then Macy Chiasson in her last 3. Those are young up-and-comers that the UFC is pushing. So, I mean, almost no surprise that she's lost to the level of competition that she's faced. Now, again, love that nickname. She goes by Cheesecake, and we got to support her simply for that reason. She's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt herself, and her main forte is the ground game. Now, she's only got 5 wins, 2 KOs, 2 subs, 1 decision, but trust me, her forte is the ground game. She has a very, very impressive and offensive guard. She's constantly attacking from bottom. And then, you know what? She's really, really quick on her feet. When she does get up on the feet, her striking has been very, very much improved as of late. And I know in her most recent fight, she got knocked out by Macy Chiasson, but Chiasson's a beast. And there's not a whole lot to say bad about that. That girl's got some serious bombs in her hands. So, no fault there. Trust me, Jojua does not hit nearly as hard as Macy Chiasson does. That's next to not a concern in this fight. So, she's got fast hands. She's got improved striking, improved footwork. She's got great ground and pound. If she gets on top of you on the mat, she makes you pay for it. Now, one thing I want to go back to is in 2018, she fought Lucy Pudilova, and she lost a unanimous decision. She got robbed. She had a brutal, absolutely brutal stand-up against Lucy Pudilova in round 1. She was on top of Pudilova, and she was working, and she was hurting her and making that count. The ref saw about 5 seconds of a lull in action. I mean, way less time than would normally be considered okay, and stood them up, and Pudilova went ham. She understood that she had lost about 75% of that round, and she went nuts trying to get it back and did serious damage to Moras. And I gotta admit that, or not admit, sorry, I've got to assume that Moras was completely dejected from that stand-up. When you're mauling your opponent and you're in a great position and round 1 is going perfectly for you, and then the referee comes over and takes it all away for no reason, and then you start getting punched in the face. I mean, she probably took way more damage than she normally would have simply because she was like, man, you got to be kidding me. And then she didn't have time to get back on her horse before Lucy Pudilova started landing it on her big time. And then she damn near broke Pudilova's arm. She had her deep in an arm bar, and Pudilova just refused to tap. So, I mean, Sarah Moras could have won that Pudilova fight several times over, and it just kind of went against her in that spot. Now, I can't justify anything with the Macy Chiasson fight, but she also had a good showing in there. She got all 3 of her last opponents. She landed a takedown on them. So I expect her to be able to come out and look a lot better than this 5-5 record suggests. And she also went out there 10 days ahead of schedule. So you counter all that in, she's better on the ground, she's faster and crisper on the feet, at least as far as our most recent video record can show us. I think this line is backwards. I think that Moras should absolutely be the favorite in this fight. And I tweeted out that I'm going to be on Moras because she opened as a plus 160 favorite. That line came down all the way to plus 125. And honestly, I thought people were going to continue seeing what I'm seeing, and it was just getting hammered. There appears to have finally been some buyback on Jojua, which I do not agree with. But right now, we can get plus 131 over at Pinnacle, and I tweeted it out, so I'm going to keep the plus 125 because that's the line I'm taking. That's the line I bet. That's the line I got. I'm shocked that it came back. So listening to this podcast, you're going to get a better line on this fight than I do, hopefully. And I think that's just money in the bank. I think that Moras should be the favorite in this case. Even though she's sporting that 5-5 record, I think she's going to come in here and she's going to turn some heads. All right, now we're moving on to men's featherweight, where Zubaira Tukhugov That's got to be it. Tukhugov is taking Lauren Murphy. Lauren Murphy. That's a chick. That's a female UFC fighter. Lorione Murphy. Jeez, these names suck. Both these guys are 28 years old. Tukhugov is 18-4-0. Murphy is 5-0, and he's making his UFC debut. Tukhugov is one of these beastly monster type of UFC fighters, and he just recently moved out to work with Khabib. I say recently, that was a long time ago. He's one of Khabib's boys, and actually he's the one that hopped the cage and sucker punched Conor in the face after that brawl when Khabib and Conor fought for the belt. He's the one that has been sidelined by the UFC, and Khabib has basically been sitting out the rest of his expanded punishment because he wanted to come back, and he didn't want to come back until his boy could come back too. That's this kid. That's this scumbag. So he's a good fighter, don't get me wrong. He's athletic, he's rangy, he throws hard, he does the fancy spinning shit, and he's got an impressive record. The dude's 18-4. Of his, 4 UFC fights, he's gone 3-1, and he's fought a decent level of competition. It's been steadily increasing all the way up to where he fought Renato Moicano, and we know Renato Moicano is an absolute beast. He lost a split decision to that dude, but he didn't look bad doing it, and that was in 2016. So he's only going to be improved since then. We know next to nothing about Murphy. I looked up what I could on him and watched some tape. He's strong, he's athletic, he's got decent takedown defense, he knows how to use the cage. I like that he throws head kicks. He's definitely a power striker type of guy. He relies on his athleticism. This is just a really, really tall mountain to climb. He's going over to Abu Dhabi, and he's facing a guy who's going to have massive hometown support, who's got far more experience than him. It's his UFC debut. I mean, he could perfectly play spoiler in this role, but I don't see it happening. I mean, the line is way out of whack here. He might be a UFC caliber guy. Maybe, if they give him the right opponents, he could work up into being something, but I don't know if now is the time. Tukhugov opened up as a -500 favorite. He's been bet down to about -450, -400 in some places. And Lauren Murphy, people got him at +425, which that's, crazy in an MMA fight, especially when both guys have questions surrounding them. You can get them at +350 now. I feel like this is dog or pass. I mean, you could sprinkle on Murphy if you wanted to, but I almost feel like you're burning money there. I also don't want to lay 4-1 on Tukhugov when he's been gone for 2.5, 3 years, and we have no idea what's happened to him since then. I think he got popped for a USADA suspension at some point as well, maybe. I'm completely off this one. I'm steering completely away from this fight. Now, we're headed to women's flyweight for a fight that I absolutely hate the most on this freaking card. We've got my girl, Jojua Calderwood, 13-4, facing off against my girl, Andrea KGB Lee. I love both of them. These are both bet-on fighters for me, and I hate that they are fighting each other in this spot. As a fan, this is going to be a great fight. This is going to be awesome to watch. It's going to be a good show. But as a fan of both of these women, I'm really pissed off that they're going against each other in this spot because it makes everything really, really hard for me. Let's start with KGB. I love that they put the lady with the name KGB in Abu Dhabi. It just makes sense, right? It fits. She is 11-2. She's been in the UFC for 3 fights, and she has definitely impressed. Girl's got a future. For sure, she's got a future. One thing to note is that she's got Aspen Ladd coming with her to Abu Dhabi, so she's training with some good company as well. Now, one thing I noticed with her is that she struggles when she gets pressured. I'm going to start with that point, put a pin in that. She goes for a head and arm throw a lot. That's a judo throw. It's a low-level throw that works in women's MMA, and we've seen her use it as recently as her most recent fight against Montella De La Rosa. And it's something that just doesn't hold up well when you get to the upper tiers. People can take your back and really attack you, and you leave yourself vulnerable when that head and arm throw doesn't pan out for you. Now, she relies heavily on her athleticism. She's strong, she's athletic, she is explosive, especially for this division. She's relatively big. When it does get to the ground, she scrambles well, and she's got really good clinch strikes. When she's in the clinch and she throws elbows and knees, she is vicious. She's absolutely brutal. And I think that she might be the stronger fighter in this matchup, which is something that definitely deserves to be said. We all know about Andrea KGB Lee. I don't have to spend too much time on her. On the flip side of this, we all know a lot about Jojo. You all know she's my girl. You all know how underrated she is. And you all know that I really enjoy betting on her as an underdog. And we've made some serious cash getting it done with Jojo. Now, one thing you may not know about Jojo is that she's actually got a 19-2 pro Muay Thai career prior to starting her MMA career. Now, she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, but she actually has faced off against a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belts. I think Andrea KGB Lee is a brown belt herself in this case. But so was Katlyn Chookagian. So was Kalindra Fahia. And you know what? Kalindra, Jojo choked that chick out. So Jojo as a blue belt choked out the brown belt Kalindra. And when they got on the mat with Katlyn Chookagian, she completely controlled the grappling exchanges. She was on top. She stuffed anything Katlyn Chookagian wanted to do. And while we're on the topic of that Katlyn Chookagian fight, Jojo got robbed. Watching that fight back, looking at the stats, Jojo absolutely won that fight. Chookagian strikes at air and makes noises, and that definitely sways the judges. And I know the guys over at Half the Battle, I listen to them, shout out to those guys. I don't know if they listen to my podcast, but they're one of the reasons I actually started doing a podcast, so props to those guys. Big shout out. I'm still a fan, even if sometimes they throw some shade at me. Katlyn Chookagian definitely, they say you get choked, and it's true, because she's a weasel. She takes the judges' scorecards from you because of the noises that she makes, because of the kiosks that she does. I really think Calderwood won that fight, and we had a bet on Calderwood in that fight. I'm really pissed off that decision went against her because I felt like it was very, very clearly hers. And that being said, she was an even money against Katlyn Chookagian. She was a minus 110, minus 115er, same as Katlyn in that fight. Now, we're seeing her come up against KGB Lee, and she's a plus 195 underdog. They've got KGB at minus 235. She is a huge, huge favorite in that fight. And I think that's just wrong. Let's look at some stats, shall we? Jojo Calderwood's got a 65-inch reach. She averages 6.10 significant strikes per minute with a 48% strike accuracy percentage. She absorbs 4.34 strikes per minute with a 52% defense. Now, you look at Andrea KGB Lee. She's gonna have a reach advantage. She's got a 69-inch reach. She averages 5.33 significant strikes a minute with a 56% accuracy. Now, she only absorbs 2.31 significant strikes per minute. She's got an astounding 74% strike defense. Now, what that means to me, and what that means in general, is that Jojo Calderwood has a higher output than KGB Lee. Now, KGB Lee is absorbing far less strikes than she's putting out, but that also has to do with the level of her opposition. She's only in her third UFC fight, and I'd say the best fighter that she's fought was Ashley Evans Smith. And Veronica Macedo may be the best fighter now, but she wasn't when she fought against KGB Lee for KGB's debut. Joanne Calderwood, on the other hand, has fought against foes like Jessica Andrade, Cynthia Calvillo, Katlyn Chookagian, Lipsky. I mean, she's got a much higher level of competition, and she's been in the UFC for far longer than KGB has. So those numbers are going to be skewed just slightly because of those kinds of things. Now, Andrea Lee averages 1.3 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 40% takedown accuracy and a 65% defense. And Jojo, on the other hand, averages 1.8 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 57% accuracy and a 60% defense. So relatively comparable for the two of them, but when it comes to getting the fight to the mat, Calderwood is the better of the two ever so slightly. Now, it looks like Lee is the better at defending the takedowns ever so slightly. But again, I feel like that kind of evens out given the type of competition that she's had and the type of competition that Calderwood has had. These two match up really well. And that's something that you're not going to hear from a lot of people. Everybody and their mother is on KGB Lee. Everyone is max betting her. Everyone is parlaying her. Everyone is bombing on her. Jojo is being completely disrespected in this spot. And I guarantee you she is going to bring the fight. She's only getting better. Since she left TriStar and she moved out to Syndicate, she's been working with people like my girl Roxanne Modafferi. She works with Frank Mir and Frank Mir's daughter. She is a legit threat on the ground. For being a blue belt, she may have a ground game advantage over KGB Lee. And I know a lot of people are going to gasp and clutch your pearls when I say that, because everyone thinks KGB Lee is better everywhere in this fight. I don't think she is. I think Joanne Calderwood, once again, is severely underrated. And I think this line would be a lot closer if she had won that fight against Chookagian. So I guess maybe I have to say thank you to the judges for robbing us on that one, because we're getting a gorgeous line on my girl Jojo at this point in time. And you all know that I can't pass up a good spot like this. In fact, over at Heritage, you can get plus 200, 2-1 on Joanne Calderwood against KGB Lee. This is going to be an absolutely disgusting fight. This is going to be hairy. This is going to be scrambly. They're going to be on top of each other and fighting for every single position. Joanne Calderwood has been, again, fighting with absolute monster submission specialists like Roxanne Modafferi and like Frank Mir. She will be prepared for the submission game of Andrea KGB Lee. I don't think Lee is going to get a submission. Joanne Calderwood has a higher output than Andrea KGB Lee does, and she goes to the legs very, very well. Any athletic advantage that KGB Lee might have, and it would only be a slight one, mind you, will probably get taken away by the leg kicks of Joanne Calderwood. And I think Jojo is going to outland Lee, which will cause problems. I think Lee is going to have to dig deep here. Don't get me wrong. She might actually still win this fight. She's got every ability to do so. She's very talented. I am high on this girl. But I think this is a spot where she's taking a step up in competition. And even if people don't want to recognize that, she is. And you all know I like to fade people when they're taking that step up in competition. Considering how close I think this fight is going to be, I'm taking that value on Calderwood at plus 200. Let's go. All right, we finally got there. We're on the main card. We've got Mairbek Taisumov kicking this thing off 27-5-0, facing Carlos Diego Ferreira, who is 15-2-0. Taisumov is 31 years old versus Diego Ferreira's 34 years old, and we are duking it out in the lightweight division. This is a hell of a fight. This is an absolute barn burner hell of a fight. And both of these guys are incredibly skilled either way this fight goes. Taisumov, he's been relatively inconsistent. He's had visa troubles and stuff like that. We've only seen him about once every year, and I mean literally once every year. He fought twice in 2015, I guess, but 2014, 2015, 2015, 2016, 17, 18, basically once a year. But he's finished almost all of his opponents. Of his 27 wins, he's got 15 KO TKOs. Absolutely dominant striking. This dude's got bombs for hands, and he can put out pretty much anybody. Super heavy hands. Carlos Diego Ferreira on the other side of this thing, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist. This is kind of a striker versus grappler, except Taisumov can wrestle and Ferreira can strike. So it's not quite a striker versus grappler because they both can do the other one pretty dang well. And Ferreira seems to have turned a corner when it comes to his striking. In fact, the last 2 of his 3 wins have come by KO. He absolutely wrecked Jared Gordon, and nobody saw that thing coming. So both these guys are evolving. This is an interesting spot. The world has been split on this one. I know a lot of people, my boy, shout out to you, Justin, is on Diego Ferreira as a big underdog, and a lot of people are parlaying the shit out of Taisumov because they think he's just going to steamroll here. He opened at a minus 275 favorite, and he's come down just a little bit, minus 260, minus 265, but he's gone up over at Bovada. You can see him at minus 285 there. And then same thing with Ferreira. He opened up at plus 215, and you can still get him in between the ballpark of plus 210 and plus 220. 60% of the money has come in on Diego. The market is really, really uncertain what they want to do with this fight. And that makes 2 of us. I have a slight lean to Taisumov here. I think that his wrestling is going to keep this fight standing, but I think that there is value on the dog in Ferreira because the dude's grappling is absolutely legit. I mean, if he finds a way to get your back, or if he finds a way to get this thing on the floor, he will be in line for a submission. It's what he does. But it's going to be really difficult to get a guy like Taisumov down. I don't know if he can, and that's the thing. But he does have that striking to his name. Like I said, very much improved striking, so he might just be able to land some kind of a shot that rocks Taisumov enough to knock him down. And I think Diego's actually got the better cardio of the two. Taisumov tends to fade a little bit as the fight goes on. It's really, really close, you guys. So Carlos Diego Ferreira averages 4.7 significant strikes per minute, 37% accuracy. He absorbs 3.03, so decent size differential there. He's definitely outputting significantly more than he is receiving. He's only got a 23% takedown accuracy rate, though. He averages less than one takedown per 15 minutes. And you flip this thing over to Taisumov, he's got a very solid 2.88 significant strikes landed per minute and absorbs 2.02. So it's closer there. He's definitely outputting more than he is absorbing, but it's a lot closer than Diego's. So when you think about that, Diego seems like he is the slightly crisper striker, I guess, maybe the more technical striker, but Mairbek Taisumov has the thought process of, I will take one to give one, and when I give one, you're gonna drop. And I think that's kind of what he does here. Now, Taisumov has a 77% takedown accuracy and then an 87% takedown defense. So what that tells me is Taisumov's going to decide where this fight takes place. If he wants it to be standing, it's going to be standing. If he wants to take Ferreira down and test his grappling against Ferreira's, maybe a bad choice, but if that's what he wants to do, then go for it. I don't like this fight. I don't like it at all. I don't like this fight at all. We're passing. We're going to pass on this one because I can't justify taking Diego Ferreira as a dog because I think he gets clipped and knocked out by Taisumov, but I don't want to lay the kind of wood on Taisumov that it would take to get there because even though I do think he's got a big advantage, he gasses out late. So if he doesn't put Diego away or take enough wind out of the sails of Diego by the third round, Diego might show up and do something crazy. Now, Diego and Taisumov have both fought a relatively similar level of competition. I've heard some people comparing the fights that they've had and the people that they've fought against, and honestly, it's about the same level. Jared Gordon, Kyle Nelson, Rustam Khabib for Ferreira, and I mean, he fought Dustin Poirier and Beneil Dariush. He lost to those two, but you know, he fought them. And then on Taisumov's side, you've got Des Green, Felipe Silva, Damir Hadzovic, Miguel Perceres. I mean, as far as their wins go, you know, you could make the argument that both of them could beat the other's wins as well. You can't just use that as a one-sided coin saying one guy can beat the other guy's record. It goes both ways. I feel like both guys, they're right about the same level. So, I mean, the way I'm talking about it, it sounds like there's going to be value on Diego Ferreira, but I really think Taisumov wins this fight. It's close, so I'm going to stay off of it, and I can't quite pick a side here because I really hate where the line's at. So good luck to everybody that's got money on this one, but I'm out. One last thing before we move on from this fight. Taisumov is the hometown boy, which one more time just gives him that slight edge. He's going to have the hometown crowd behind him. If it's close, he's going to win the fight. I think he possibly could bank rounds 1 and 2, landing bigger, harder shots if he doesn't knock Ferreira out. And Ferreira, I don't believe, went out very recently to Abu Dhabi. I am not able to actually precisely tell you how quickly he went out there. I think he's only been out there for about 2 or 3 days. And if that's the case, it's been less than a week for him. And if he's the fighter with the better gas tank, he actually might have some travel issues as far as his gas tank, as far as his energy levels. He may not have acclimated with enough time, which is just one more thing that adds that question for me. Since I wasn't able, based on his social media, to determine exactly when he got out there, he may have gotten out there early. So it's just one more question mark. I don't have enough information, and I don't feel comfortable on either side. I guess I wouldn't hate if you wanted to put Taisumov in some kind of a parlay to like bring the price down on him if you like that side of things, but I don't like playing either of these guys straight personally. Now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of this thing. Curtis Blaydes takes on Shamil Abdurakhimov at heavyweight. This is a good one. The big boys finally got here. Curtis Blaydes is 11-2-0 with Shamil Abdurakhimov having a record of 20-4. The elder statesman. Curtis is only 28 years old. The dude is absolutely on the upward path in the heavyweight division. He's got a long, bright future ahead of him. Those only 2 losses were both TKO stoppages to Francis freaking Ngannou. That dude has got to be out for revenge once again, but you got to wonder how much his brain got rattled around having 2 KO losses to a guy that hits as hard as Ngannou does. Shamil Abdurakhimov is 38 years old, so he's inching ever closer to that 40 that I definitely try to stay away from, but he's looking pretty dang good. His two out of his last 3 have been won by KO. I mean, he outclassed Andrei Arlovsky, KO'd Chase Sherman and Marcin Tybura. Before that, he did lose by KO to Derek Lewis, but that was in the 4th round late like Derek likes to do, and he didn't look half bad before that. Shamil Abdurakhimov actually has a pretty good freaking resume when it comes to his accolades in fighting. And the biggest thing for him is he's slow. He's got really heavy hands. He's a hard puncher, but he's slow. He's slow and plodding. If it hits the mat, he's a very good grappler, but I'm concerned with his age. We all know what Curtis Razor Blaydes is bringing to the table. The dude is basically a new young Cain Velasquez. He wants to take his opponents down. He wants to throw them around the cage and maul them and TKO them on the mat. The concern that I have with Curtis Razor Blaydes here is, like I said, he's had his brain rattled by Francis. I gotta wonder if that's going to cause him chin problems in the future. He's really young, so he can probably bounce back from it, but I'm skeptical of that. And he does tend to slow down. He can take his opponents down, but they do tend to get back up, and then he slows later in round 3. He does show absolutely great, excellent takedown timing. He gets in really well, and he's really physically strong. He can take these 250-pound men and throw them above his head if he wants to. He averages 6.79 takedowns per 15 minutes. Whoa, let me say that again. 6.79 takedowns per 15 minutes. Holy crap. And he's got a 57% accuracy. The dude's heavyweight Colby Covington. He averages 3.71 significant strikes per minute, and he only absorbs 2.03. You do have to sprinkle just a little bit of salt on that because that's mostly done on the ground. He usually hits his opponent where his opponents cannot hit him back. You flip this thing over to Shamil Abdurakhimov, and he averages 2.64 significant strikes a minute and absorbs 2.36. So right around the same number. He's averaging just a little more damage than he brings in, and that's not a good thing. So a guy like Curtis Razor Blaydes is going to have a speed advantage. He's going to have a youth advantage. He's going to have a strength advantage, and he is a minus 500 favorite because of all of that. And I'm not touching this dang thing because I've got questions. I've got very serious questions. I've told you guys time and time again on this podcast that we are trying not to fade the home team. If you want to bet on anybody, you bet on the OV. You bet on the guy from Russia. You bet on the Muslim fighter because they're going to have a legit advantage when it comes to the judges' scorecards. I would not be shocked one little bit if we saw not one but several robberies in this fight card, the whole dang event. And Curtis Blaydes, he made the poor choice to go out roughly 3 days ahead of time. Dude is going to be jet lagged as all hell. He went out yesterday. I saw the posts on social media that he was traveling yesterday. The fight is Saturday. He is in no way going to be acclimated to the temperature, to the elevation, and it's hot as balls over there. It's a freaking desert. So the fact that Curtis Blaydes slows down in round 3, the fact that he has been KO'd the crap out of by Francis Ngannou not once but twice, I've got to wonder if this isn't a letdown spot for him. I'm seriously considering a bet on Abdurakhimov. You can get him at plus 400, 4-1. If Blaydes is tired, he will not have the pop in his punches that he normally does. He will not have the speed that he normally does. He won't be able to keep up the takedown chains that he normally does. Abdurakhimov doesn't have to travel. He's going to be as fresh as a 38-year-old fighter can be, and he's got a decent set of grappling chops on him himself. I've got a spooky feeling on this one, you guys. I've got a really, really spooky feeling on this one. I'm staying completely away from it. I know a lot of you probably do, but if you've got Curtis Razor Blaydes parlayed into a bunch of stuff, God bless your soul and good luck, because I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Shamil Abdurakhimov robbed the shit out of Curtis Razor Blaydes and cashes as a plus 400 underdog in his hometown. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Next up, we've got Islam Makhachev taking on Davi Ramos. Makhachev is 17-1, where Davi Ramos is 10-2, and this is a hell of a fight, an absolutely great matchup. So you've got Islam Makhachev, who's the classic AKA fighter, very much similar to Khabib, trains with the dude. It's Khabib's boy. So he's got the great takedown offense and wrestling game. He's got improved striking. So I plan to see a better version of him. And Davi Ramos on the other side of this thing is a muscle junkie from Brazil. Dude is thick as hell. He's 5'8", a complete brick shithouse. One of those dudes where you have no idea how he makes the weight cut. He's just got so much muscle layered on him. He's got absolutely scary submission ground game. The dude is a high level grappler, and he's got crazy power in his hands. He throws winging wild hooks and hurts people. He almost knocked out Austin Hubbard in his last fight in the 3rd round. His gas tank does wane because he gets a little tired with all that muscle on him as the fights go later on in the at the end of the 2nd round, kind of into the 3rd round. So he does slow down a decent bit, but man, this is another fight where it's just too hard for me to call, unfortunately. I want to tell you to take the dog on Davi Ramos. I really want to tell you to take Davi Ramos, but I can't. He opened as a plus 200 underdog, and this is another reverse line movement spot. 41% of the money has come in on Islam Makhachev, taking him from minus 240 all the way up to minus 360. And Davi obviously went from 200 to about plus 270, plus 275. I think that line is way wide. You're getting so much value on Davi Ramos there, but I just don't know that he can actually win. I mean, Islam Makhachev is a sick fighter. He's averaged only 0.83 significant strikes absorbed per minute, and he's the only UFC fighter in history to average less than 1 significant strike per minute over a at least 5-fight minimum. We get that stat from our boy, MMA by the Numbers podcast. Hope to see you back soon, man. I always loved your stuff. Glad you got a good new paying job, but we missed the podcast. That's just an incredible stat. He's the only UFC fighter who's had more than 5 fights and averages less than 1 significant strike per minute. And that's absorbed, by the way. He averages 1.91 significant strikes landed per minute, so he's definitely outpacing his opponents, but it's a very slow outpacing. He slows the game down a lot. He's got a 70% takedown accuracy and a 92% takedown defense, so he really decides where the fight takes place. Davi, on the flip side of this thing, is kind of the complete opposite. He's a total monster. 3.47 significant strikes landed per minute, absorbing 2.79. So a decent gap between the landed versus absorbed for Davi Ramos, and he's got a 52% accuracy himself, so he doesn't have much trouble getting the fights to the ground when he wants to, and he's got a 0 or a 100% takedown defense, whichever way you'd like to look at it. Nobody in the UFC has been dumb enough to try to take Davi Ramos down. And that might change this weekend because that's kind of Islam's entire game. So the thing for me here is Davi Ramos has big power. He explodes, but that takes energy and he gets tired. Islam Makhachev is a speed machine. He's thin, he's lithe, he's strong, he's aggressive. He can kind of pick and poke at Davi Ramos from range. And then, like I said, he might actually be dumb enough to get in there on a takedown. And Davi would welcome the ground game. I got to wonder if Islam's game plan isn't just going to be to wear Davi Ramos out. And I think that Islam is going to be a good enough grappler to be able to protect himself from Davi Ramos and be able to disengage and get the fight back to the feet and stay clear of the submissions just enough to tire Davi Ramos. He might get in some trouble. It might get hairy a couple times, but I don't know if Davi's going to be able to land clean enough to hurt Islam. And I also don't know that Davi's going to be able to lock up a submission. Now that sounds crazy because granted, Davi can literally submit anybody. And if you want to take that Hail Mary puncher's chance, Davi's the guy to do it. You're getting plus 275 on a guy that can win by hurting his opponent and then choking him out. He can do that to literally anybody on the roster in this weight class. I just don't know if he does it on Saturday. And if it goes to a decision, he is not winning. He can't beat Islam Makhachev by decision. It won't happen. And Makhachev is so elusive. He's so hard to hit. And once he gets on top of you, he just doesn't absorb damage. So I don't know if Davi's going to be able to do much offensively against Makhachev. And I don't know what Makhachev's game plan is here. I mean, it's got to be either be all out or all in, you would think. And that's kind of a dangerous game to play with a guy like Ramos. But I'm having a weird hesitation here that normally I would want to dive all over these big dogs. And I can't go against a guy like Islam Makhachev fighting in Abu Dhabi when he's a Muslim from Russia and he's got the crazy record that he does and he's got the crazy numbers that he does. He's a guy that you're gonna have to show me. You are going to have to show me that you can beat him. He got upset by Adriano Martins via first round TKO back in October of 2015, but that was a freaking long time ago. And nobody's perfect in this game except for the man himself, Khabib. So I don't know if Davi can bottle lightning twice. Islam might just roll here, and when the props do come out, Islam Makhachev by decision might be a decent one to see if that number comes down at all. I mean, he's such a sizable favorite that I don't know if it would be worth it, but that's kind of the only angle that I can look at it from here. And at this point, I'm just going to have to go ahead and pass again. All right, folks, co-main event of the evening. We have got a good one. The co-main and the main event are both at lightweight. It's almost a cool little tournament thing we've got going on here. We have got Edson Barboza, 20-7, going up against Paul, the Irish Dragon Felder, 16-4. And this is a rematch. The first fight was a barn burner, and we get treated to round 2. I cannot wait. So first thing that we need to do is look at this stylistic matchup from Barboza's side of things. He's 33 years old, and he's been in the UFC since freaking 2010. He's been in the UFC forever, and he has always been right there, right on the cusp of greatness, right on the edge of getting that title shot, KOing everybody on his way up until he meets the top end of the division, and then he gets sent straight back down, and it's really a shame. He is one of the guys that could go in the list of all-time greats to never have won a belt. He's been around basically forever, and I really feel like the Edson Barboza puzzle has been solved. And he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. Now, the last time I doubted him, he took a bad stoppage by Kevin Lee in the 5th round when he got pounded out. And I really thought Dan Hooker was going to come in and feast on the remains of Barboza, but he showed us that he is still more than there. The beating he put on Dan Hooker was something else. But then he turns around and gets highlight KO'd, blasted by Justin Gaethje. And that was a 1-round barn burner of a fight. That was an excellent fight. Both guys got hurt. Justin Gaethje was able to zombie through it better than Barboza was and land that kill shot. But this is the point where we gotta start worrying about the damage on Edson Barboza. Now, Paul Felder, the last time they fought was way back in 2015. So I don't think that Edson Barboza has changed a whole lot since then. He's built for speed. He has always been 0% body fat. He's super fast. You know he's going to spin. You know he's going to go after the legs. And you know he's got a weakness to the ground game. None of that's changed. Paul Felder, on the flip side of things, has improved drastically, I feel like, since then. He's really come into his own as a fighter. Now, he lost a rough split decision to Ross Pearson, but ever since then, he really got things back on track. After he dropped a TKO loss to Francisco Trinaldo in 2016, he really put it together against Ricci, Stevie Ray, Charles Oliveira, TKOing all 3 of those guys with hell bows. Paul Felder is a huge 155er. I don't know how he makes the cut. He could fight very comfortably at 170 pounds, but he gets down to 155 and he can rough people up down there. Now, he dropped a split decision to Mike Perry, but in that fight, he broke his hand in the first round, and he was a short notice replacement, if I recall correctly. I think he wins that fight, actually. If he didn't break his hand and he had all of his tools, I'll bet you he actually pulls away with a win there. And then he roughed up James Vick. Now, that one is one that I don't know. I kind of wish he had KO'd James Vick. I mean, James Vick has been KO'd in the last 2 of his 3 fights, and the only guy that didn't do it was Paul Felder, but Dan Hooker and Gaethje were the other 2 guys in there. So just from like a power perspective, it would feel better to me if Felder was able to land that KO shot. At any rate, this fight is super, super interesting to me because I think Felder is the guy who's going to add new wrinkles to his game plan since the last time they fought. There's a cool segment on the UFC embedded videos where Paul's rewatching their first fight, and he's talking through what he could have done differently, what he could have done better, and what he's going to do better this time. And he's absolutely right. He knows exactly where he went wrong, and he knows exactly what he can do to fix it. And a guy like Barboza, I'm sorry, he's one of those fighters that's just locked in. He's been that kind of fighter his entire career, and changing the way that he fights at the age of 33 after the long storied career that he's had is damn near impossible. His body type is built for what he does, and he's got a solid game plan, and if you can work around that, you can beat him. So Edson Barboza has got a 75-inch reach. He's 5'11". They're the same height, but Barboza's got that 5-inch reach advantage, and that definitely plays into things. Barboza averages 4.01 significant strikes per minute, but the crazy thing is, with the way he's been fighting lately and the amount of damage he's been taking lately, he absorbs 4.18 significant strikes per minute. The scales have tipped. Barboza, with a 60% striking defense, supposedly, is actually getting hit with more significant strikes than he is landing. And that's something that, honestly, I never thought I'd see. With the kind of output this guy has and the kind of power that he puts into all of his shots, there's no way that people should be hitting him harder than he is hitting them. But it's happened. Now, he's definitely a highlight reel finisher. He can finish this fight from any position at any time. He's got that kind of explosiveness inside of him. But one thing that we're able to kind of lean on here, kind of tipping my hand a little bit for the pick, is that Paul Felder has an incredible chin. He tanks damage. I can't remember the last time I've seen him rocked. I know Francisco Trinaldo TKO'd him in round 3 when we talked about the record. That was back in 2016. Of his last 5 fights, even fighting guys like Mike Perry and James Vick, they haven't done a damn thing to him. And he stood toe-to-toe with Barboza back in 2015 and didn't have any kind of a problem with it. Now, he's taken a whole lot less damage than Barboza has in the recent years, and Barboza's last KO from Gaethje was bad. It was back in March of 2019, so he's taken about 6 months off, and that's normally the minimum, bare minimum, that you want to see a guy take off when they have some kind of a bad KO. Now, the Kevin Lee KO, that was a TKO, a doctor stoppage, a mercy stoppage. He took a bunch of damage, but it wasn't a really bad KO. That one is the kind of fight that I think that you can take less time from to recover from. The Justin Gaethje KO was one where he curled up. I mean, he got flatlined and was in the fetal position, but on his back instead of on his side for a good 30 seconds after it happened. That was a scary, scary KO. And we've got to wonder if the cobwebs aren't still a little rattled up in there. Paul Felder is the bigger man in this case, and even though Barboza is going to enjoy a speed advantage here, I think that Paul Felder is going to be able to hold him up against the cage. He'll be able to take him down if he wants to, and Paul Felder's ground and pound and elbows against the fence are something of nightmares. Paul Felder puts out 3.53 significant strikes per minute, and he only absorbs 3.08. He's got a 50% striking defense, so even though it's not a big differential, he's definitely landing more power shots than he is absorbing. And neither of these guys are looking to take this fight to the ground. Barboza's got an 80% takedown defense, and the last thing that you want to do is put your head down by this guy's knees, because that's one of his highlight KOs, is that flying knee that crushed poor Benil Dariush. And I don't know that Paul necessarily wants to do that. He's the crazy kind of bastard that might try it, though. And he's also got a hard enough head that he might actually be able to survive it. So, I mean, really, I love this spot. I love this spot for Paul Felder. My boy Rockstar Z, shout out, man. He got on it early. He got the big juicy dog money on this guy, and I think he's right. We can get plus 135 right now over at 5 dimes. That's the line we're going to take. That's what we're going to lock up. We are going to roll with the dog here. I think that Paul Felder is able to be the more aggressive fighter. He'll have more output. He can win this thing in a decision. If this thing doesn't go to decision, either of these guys have the capability of finishing it. I can see Paul Felder welting up Barboza with some serious elbows, and if Barboza's chin has been cracked for the final time, Paul can definitely put him away. And don't get me wrong, Barboza can always finish this thing. But when a guy is on the decline, when he seems to be in the twilight of his career, you don't want to be laying minus 1.5, minus 1.6 on a fighter in that type of position. Let's fade Barboza and try and make some cash on him as his career winds down. And this is just a case where one guy's stock is dropping, the other guy's stock is rising. And we definitely want to be on the side of the rising stock. The pick is Paul Felder at plus 135. All right, diehards, that brings us to the main event of the evening, the big kahuna, the one that we have all been waiting for. Champion versus champion, the undefeated Khabib, the Eagle Nurmagomedov, 27-0, taking on Dustin the Diamond Poirier, interim lightweight champion versus, I don't want to say undisputed lightweight champion because apparently he's disputed since there's another belt out there, but you know what I mean. Champion versus freaking champion. This fight had to happen. It's second place to Khabib versus Tony. It needed to happen, and I'm so happy that these guys are both in the positions that they're in. This is going to be an incredible fight. Now let's start off a little bit differently. Let's kick this thing off by taking a look at the line. Dustin Poirier opened up as a plus 295 underdog, and over at Heritage, you can get him all the way up at plus 360. Reverse line movement spot, 68% of the money has come in on Dustin. 32% of the money has pushed Khabib from a minus 355 all the way up to a minus 500, minus 450. You can find him anywhere in that ballpark. And that is just, I mean, Khabib was only a 2-1 favorite over a guy like Conor McGregor. So if that tells you anything, this line has gotten far, far wider than that fight ever was going to. And we've only all started to understand and believe just how dominant Khabib is. So it doesn't surprise me. And Dustin the Diamond also doesn't have the kind of following that Conor McGregor did. I think that line was set where it was because they knew all that Conor McGregor money was going to come in, and they couldn't risk having too much dog money on a guy like that where people were going to be throwing millions on him as an underdog. Can you imagine Conor has a plus 350 underdog against Khabib? That risk for the bookies would have been enormous. That would have maybe been their biggest risk of all time. So, at least for MMA. Anyway, back to the fight breakdown. We all know Khabib. I don't have to tell you guys much of anything about Khabib. He does what he does. He's a wrecking ball. He gets in there, he takes his opponents down, and he roughs them up. His striking game is very much improved, especially ever since he fought Al Iaquinta. The last two fights, Iaquinta and Conor McGregor, we've seen a huge, drastic step-up improvement for Khabib's striking game. And he completely disrespected Conor. So that was a beautiful moment when Khabib decided to stand with McGregor and landed that giant bomb on him. That was the moment where I was like, oh, this is over. Like, not only can Khabib take it to the mat and just end it anytime he wants, but now he's landing these huge, massive bombs on McGregor where McGregor's supposed to have the biggest advantage. That was the moment that sealed his fate in my eyes. I was like, it's over. So Khabib averages 5.09 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's averaging more than one takedown every 15 minutes. He has an unrelenting offensive takedown game, and he's got a 44% accuracy. He's got an 84% takedown defense. Next to nobody tries to actually take Khabib down, but I guess apparently it's happened because he's not 100%. I don't know when or where that took place, but Yeah, that'd be interesting to go back and find out, huh? It looks like Abel Trujillo, he got one on him. Abel Trujillo and Gleison Tibau are the guys that got one each on Khabib way back in the day. So his significant strikes per minute is 4.29, and he's got an incredible 1.70 absorbed. So he has a massive, one of the biggest differentials in strike output versus absorbed that I think I've ever seen. And that's because of the ground game. He puts people on their back and he beats them into submission, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Dustin, on the flip side of this thing, he has fought tooth and nail for everything he has ever had. This guy has never had anything given to him. He's had to take it all through hard work and sheer force of will. I love Dustin the Diamond Poirier. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage here, and he averages 5.75 significant strikes per minute with a 49% accuracy. Now, he does absorb 4.08 significant strikes per minute with a 56% defense rating, but that's because his last several fights were Max Holloway, Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Anthony Pettis, and Eddie Alvarez again. That's his last 5 fights. That's a striker's delight. Every single one of those has been an absolute war. Now, he's got a 69% defense rating, and he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Sorry, takedown defense rating. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So that's something to keep in mind here. Even when Khabib gets Dustin to the mat, Dustin has a severely underrated ground game. No one is able to do anything with Khabib when he's on top of them. Dustin might be the first one who may be comfortable once he's down there on his back. And that's something everyone's always said about Tony Ferguson, is that Tony would be the guy who would be comfortable and crazy enough off his back that he might be able to survive and do something. That's where I think Dustin has the exact same setup. Now, long story short here is this is dog or pass. If you want to parlay Khabib, you are risking some crazy shit, my friend. I'm going to take Dustin the Diamond Poirier at plus 360. We are locking up that juicy plus 360 because basically you're saying that he has less than a 25% chance in this fight. His implied probability is far higher than 25%. I guarantee you that. Dustin Poirier, you could lock him in the cage with any human alive except for maybe Anthony Rumble Johnson or Francis Ngannou, and he stands more than a 25% chance of getting out of there. The dude is a phenomenal talent. He's an excellent striker. He's got an endless gas tank, and that's something that was proven in his fight with Max Holloway. I picked against Max Holloway because I thought that Max was going to be able to put on the type of aggression and cardio that Dustin would wilt under. We've never seen him in that kind of a situation, and Max always outpaces his opponents, and he always breaks them with his constant, insane pressure. Not only did Dustin stand through all of that and take everything Max had to throw at him, but he answered back, and he answered back harder. Now, Dustin has legitimate knockout power. He generally tends to go the route of piecing his opponents up and breaking them before he puts them away, but that's actually been a more recent development in his striking game. Earlier in his career, he was KOing people in the first and early second round because he could. He realized that he needed more gas in the tank, and he could be the better, more technical fighter, kind of in the middle between Conor McGregor and Max Holloway, where he doesn't need to completely outrun them over 5 minutes like Max Holloway does and then break them at the very end, but he also doesn't need to blow his load in the early rounds trying to put them away in round 1. He does it kind of in the middle, and then he volume overwhelms them with giant bombs that are way harder than anybody else at that spot throws. Khabib is going to try and take Dustin down. I think Dustin is going to be able to remain calm, remain safe, and conserve energy. Khabib has been slowing down as of late, and we've seen it especially even in the Conor fight. Like when he gets to round 3, he has to take a round off in order to reload and come out hard again in round 4. We've seen that Dustin has more than enough gas to go a full 25 minutes at a very, very high pace, and he's done nothing but grapple this entire camp. Guys, I've got an upset coming. I think that Dustin Poirier is going to make history. I think he's going to step up to the biggest stage there has ever been in mixed martial arts, and he is going to add that number 1 on Khabib's loss record. The undefeated Eagle is going down on Saturday. I can see Dustin winning a decision. I know, gasp and clutch your pearls. he absolutely can survive the onslaught and then deal enough damage to come back on Khabib. Now, granted, that's not nearly as reasonable considering that they are in Abu Dhabi. Khabib is going to have a massive, massive push from the crowd and may even have rigged judges in his corners. So we don't want to guarantee on that. I do want Dustin to knock Khabib out. I think he can do it. But unlike everybody else that you're going to listen to, he does not have to do it in round 1 or 2. He simply doesn't. Because if both of them are tired, if both of them slow down, Dustin can pour on the gas, defend the takedowns, and force Khabib to stand with him in rounds 3, 4, and 5. And then he can mount enough offense to put Khabib away over the course of those later rounds. He also, I think, can actually win rounds 3, 4, and 5 with the dominant striking and pull away with a decision 3 rounds to 2. It's possible. It's a long shot, but it's possible. Conor McGregor completely runs out of gas. So people that are going to say that Dustin is just like Conor is a shell of himself as soon as he gets to round 3. He has nothing left in the tank, and grappling completely drains him. Dustin does not. Dustin can remain calm. Dustin can stay safe on his back, and he can conserve his energy, and he knows how to do that so that when he gets back up in round 2, in round 3, in round 4, he still has enough energy. He still has enough in his arms that he can throw the kind of punches that he needs to throw at that stage of the fight. And he won't be afraid of Khabib's takedown. The fact that he's a black belt on the mat, obviously, I am not counting on the fact that Poirier is going to be able to submit Khabib off his back, because if anyone was going to submit Khabib, I've got a real hard time believing they're going to do it throwing up a triangle or an armbar, some crazy shit like that with how dominant he is on top. But if anybody would do that, it'd be Dustin or potentially Tony, and they would be kind of the only guys capable of doing so. His ground game is underrated. His gas tank is underrated. His knockout power is underrated. This line is too wide. Even if Khabib wins this thing the same way he always wins every time, I'm more than happy to take a shot on Dustin Poirier because that line is disrespectful to him. Now keep an eye out on my Twitter handle because I'm eyeing some totals. Those aren't out yet, but I will be tweeting out some additional official bets that are going to go on the record for this one, and I'm potentially digging up some kind of a parlay for you folks for this weekend as well. So keep an eye out for that. Yes, I know we have been on a 9-unit skid. Yes, I know we are on a 2-fight losing streak, but we got to that 30 units by making big balls plays and taking big, juicy dogs. We are getting right back to that. Let's recap those picks. We're kicking our night off with Don Madge laying the -155. We are rolling with the hometown kid Omari Akhmedov at -118. We are taking the sheer value of a flipped line that should be the other way. Sarah Moras at +125. Give me some cheesecake. We are rolling with my girl Jojua Calderwood at +200. Disrespect. We are playing Paul Felder at +135. And once again, the disrespectful line of +360 with Dustin the Diamond Poirier to make history, unify the lightweight belt, and get the damn thing done. Thank you, diehards, for sticking with me. I love you all. I am looking forward massively to UFC 242. Like, share, subscribe at Diehard MMA Pod on Twitter. Hit me up. Let's freaking roll.